I got involved in poetry actually before I moved into New Orleans. I grew up in Connecticut, and I was a high school student taking a creative writing class as a senior in high school, and I saw something called the Deaf Poetry Jam.
City buses overturned. Pelicans screamed a city in disarray.
As a show which had poets, many of whom were involved in performance poetry, and spoken word, and poetry slam competitions. And it was different poets from around the country. But I saw them, and I was taking a creative writing class at the time. We had an assignment to write. It was around the time for Thanksgiving break, and we had an assignment just to write something with the theme of gratitude. And so I saw some poets that really inspired me, and I ended up writing a poem. At the time, I was writing really bad raps and was trying to be a rapper, but just awful. And what I saw when I saw these deaf poets is there were a lot of poets that were very funny and just all different lanes, and I was oh, this is something that really connects with me as a fan of comedy and other things. And so I wrote that poem, and later on I tried out for a youth national team and ended up making that. And then since then, poetry has been a part of my life for I don't know how many years now, but close to 20, not quite 20, but close to it. To New Orleans to teach. And I felt particularly my first couple of years, first 2 or 3 years teaching, that was before I got heavily involved in the poetry scene here. So essentially I'd left college. At college, I was a part of our spoken word club. We put on shows. A lot of the folks that I'm still friends with from my college undergraduate experience are folks that I knew through the poetry club. But yeah, when I moved down to New Orleans, my focus just full-time was teaching. So I would do maybe a poetry after school programs or things like that, but I wasn't really actively writing and performing. And I had a friend who was also a teacher and also grew up in New Orleans. And so he was plugged into some of the different open mics at different scenes. And so he took me out to an event. It was called Pizzazz. Well, the group that put it on was called Pizzazz Productions. And they used to have an open mic prior to Katrina at a venue called True Brew. And it was this legendary night. I remember hearing about it, so this was before my time, but hearing about it, and all these poets, many of whom I'd seen on that Deaf Poetry Jam show. So poets from New Orleans like Sonny Patterson or Anis Mojgani would come and deliver their poems. So they were having a reunion show, and it was right before a hurricane. It may have been Gustav. I can't remember which hurricane it was, but it was right before. And so I would have never, because it was a big show, and I would have never been able to get my name on the list. But because a lot of people were leaving town, there was some space. So I ended up seeing a bunch of phenomenal performers, meeting some people who later become friends with, and then had a chance to perform as well. The same friend also took me to this place called Pass It On Open Mic, which is where the team that I was a part of, Team Slam New Orleans, where I was teammates with folks like Tariana Tank Ball, who's a musician in addition to a poet, and my other teammates, Icon, Akeem, Catalyst, a scribe called Quest, who is a collaborator with Bard. All of these folks I met for the first time at Pass It On, and so I'm getting off track a little bit, but to go back to your initial question, what was really exciting, and beyond exciting, just really important, was getting out of my education bubble where I basically knew, I obviously knew my students and families and the teachers that I taught with, many of whom were from out of town like myself, and to be able to actually be a part of the poetry community, I felt like I got to know New Orleans a lot more, and just kind of have a better understanding, my eyes more open to all the great things about New Orleans, and just I'll never, I've lived in New Orleans since 2006, 7. I know about being a native and growing up here, but I'm thankful to have the opportunity to connect to the New Orleans poetry community, and as a way of knowing New Orleans a little bit more, including through folks' work and hearing poems, and in addition to the friendships and the relationships that have developed.